What if I told you that the man I thought was my soulmate, the one who made me feel beautiful for the first time in 20 years, was actually being paid by my own sister to pretend to love me? And what if I told you that when he found out the truth about why he was hired, he threw that money back in her face and chose something that would change both our lives forever? I'm Sarah. I'm 52 years old. And this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the cruelest betrayals can lead to the most unexpected miracles. But before I tell you what happened when he refused that money, you need to understand how desperate my life had become. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Heartland Confessions. Your support means the world to me, and I read every single comment you leave. At 52, I had given up on love. Not by choice, mind you, but because life had beaten that hope right out of me. After my divorce 15 years ago, I'd tried dating apps, blind dates, even speed dating events. But when you're a size 22 woman in a world that worships size 2, you learn pretty quickly that you're invisible. My sister Jennifer had watched me struggle for years. She's always been the pretty one, the one who married her college sweetheart, had 3 beautiful children, and seemed to float through life without ever knowing what it felt like to be overlooked. She meant well, I know she did, but what she did next would shatter everything I thought I knew about trust, family, and love. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was at my usual coffee shop, the little place on Maple Street where I'd been going for 5 years, when this man walked in, tall, maybe 6'2", salt and pepper hair, wearing a navy blue sweater that brought out his eyes. He looked like he belonged in a commercial for retirement planning. Distinguished, confident, the kind of man who'd never looked twice at someone like me. But here's the thing that should have been my first warning sign. He walked straight to my table. Not past it, not near it, straight to it. In 52 years of living, attractive men had never walked straight to my table. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice was warm, like honey over biscuits. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I couldn't help noticing you're reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That's one of my favorite books." I looked down at my book, then back up at him, certain he had me confused with someone else. You read romance novels?" He laughed, and it was genuine. "My late wife got me hooked on them. She always said the best love stories weren't just about finding someone, they were about finding yourself worthy of being found." That line should have been too perfect. Looking back, it was too perfect. But when you've spent 15 years convincing yourself you're unlovable, perfect doesn't feel suspicious. It feels like a miracle. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand. "Sarah," I managed, shaking it and trying not to notice how his hand lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "Would you mind if I bought you another coffee, Sarah? I'd love to hear what you think about Evelyn's story." For the next 2 hours, we talked about books, about life, about everything and nothing. He told me about his late wife, Carol, who'd passed 3 years earlier from cancer. He spoke about her with such tenderness that my heart ached for him. I told him about my divorce, my struggles with dating, my job at the library. He listened like every word mattered. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him, but I spent the entire drive home waiting for the other shoe to drop. Men like David didn't ask for the numbers of women like me. But that night, he texted me. "Thank you for the most wonderful afternoon I've had in years. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow?" That should have been warning sign number 2. The next 3 months were like living in a fairy tale. David wasn't just attentive, he was devoted. He brought me flowers every Friday, not roses, but the wildflower bouquets I'd mentioned loving as a child. He remembered that I preferred tea to coffee after 3 p.m., that I was allergic to shellfish, that my favorite movie was You've Got Mail, because it reminded me that love could happen in the most ordinary moments. He never once made me feel self-conscious about my weight. When I ordered dessert, he'd smile and say, "Life's too short not to enjoy the sweet things." When I worried about keeping up on our walks, he'd slow down and say he preferred taking his time anyway. When I caught my reflection in restaurant windows and winced, he'd take my hand and tell me I was beautiful. For the first time in decades, I believed him. My sister Jennifer was thrilled. "I'm so happy you finally found someone," she'd say during our weekly phone calls. "David sounds perfect for you." But there were little things that didn't quite add up, though I ignored them because I was so desperate to believe in this miracle. David never talked about his friends, never mentioned family besides his late wife. He was always available when I called, almost like he didn't have a life outside of me. When I suggested meeting his friends or visiting places that had been meaningful to him and Carol, he changed the subject. The biggest red flag came in month 2. We were at dinner at Giuseppe's, the Italian place downtown, when I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, across the restaurant. I waved at her, and she did this double take, staring at David like she'd seen a ghost. Later that evening, I asked David about it. "Did you know that woman who was staring at you? Mrs. Henderson?" His face went blank for just a moment, just a split second, before he smiled. "I don't think so. I have one of those faces, I guess. People always think they know me from somewhere." I should have pressed him on it. I should have asked Mrs. Henderson about it the next day. But I didn't, because I was terrified of poking holes in the only happiness I'd felt in years. By month 3, David was talking about the future. He wanted to take me to meet his sister in Colorado. He mentioned looking for a house with a bigger garden because he knew I loved to plant flowers. He even brought up the possibility of marriage, saying Carol had always told him that when you find love twice in one lifetime, you don't waste time. That's when everything started to unravel, and it began with a phone call I was never supposed to hear. I was at David's apartment, a tidy place that somehow felt more like a hotel room than a home, when his phone rang. He was in the shower, so I didn't think anything of answering it. The caller ID said, "Jenny," and I figured it might be urgent. "Hello, this is Sarah. David's..." "Sarah?" The voice was panicked, female, definitely not someone calling to chat. "Why are you answering David's phone? Where is he?" "He's in the shower. Can I take a message?" There was a long pause, then a whispered curse. "Oh God, this is bad. This is really, really bad." Before I could ask what was wrong, she hung up. When David came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair still dripping, I told him about the call. His face went white. "What did she say exactly?" "Just that it was bad, really bad. Who is Jenny, David? You've never mentioned her." That's when I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Not confusion, not surprise. Fear. She's my business partner. We've been having some problems with a client. Nothing for you to worry about." But his hands were shaking as he reached for his phone, and when he saw 3 missed calls from Jenny, his jaw tightened in a way that made my stomach drop. What I didn't know was that in the next 24 hours, my entire world was about to crumble. The next evening I was supposed to meet David for dinner, but he canceled last minute. "Emergency at work," he said, but his voice sounded strained. "Can we reschedule for tomorrow?" I said of course, but something felt wrong. In 3 months, David had never canceled on me. Never. So I did something I'd never done before. I drove to his apartment. His car wasn't there, but I decided to wait. I sat in my car across the street for 2 hours, feeling foolish and paranoid when I saw him pull up, but he wasn't alone. A woman got out of the passenger side, petite, blonde, probably in her 40s. They stood by the car talking in hushed, urgent voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was clear. This was an argument. Then the woman grabbed David's arm and said something that made him pull away sharply. That's when I heard it, carried on the evening breeze. 3 months, David. 3 months of this charade, and now you're telling me you can't go through with it? My blood went cold. She's a good person, Jenny. She doesn't deserve this. She's paying you $40,000. You signed a contract. $40,000. A contract. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I'm giving the money back. All of it. I can't do this anymore. You can't just quit. Do you have any idea what this will do to her when she finds out? To me? That's when the blonde woman turned toward the streetlight, and I saw her face clearly. It was my sister Jennifer. The woman who had been so happy that I'd finally found someone was standing in front of my boyfriend's apartment, arguing about a contract and $40,000. I sat in that car for another hour after they went inside, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Had Jennifer hired David to date me? Like some kind of escort? The thought made me physically sick. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that every moment of happiness over the past 3 months had been a lie. Every "I love you," every tender touch, every time he'd made me feel beautiful, it had all been an act. I drove home in a daze and spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do. Confront him? Confront Jennifer? Pretend I'd never heard anything and see how long they could keep up the charade? By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going to give David one chance to tell me the truth. But what happened next would surprise all 3 of us. I called David the next morning and asked him to come over. "We need to talk," I said, and something in my voice must have told him I knew. He arrived an hour later, looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled. He stood in my doorway looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "Sarah, just come in and sit down, David. Please." We sat on my couch, the same couch where he'd first told me he loved me just 2 weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm going to ask you a question," I said, "and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" He nodded, but his hands were clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles were white. "Did my sister hire you to date me?" The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. David's face crumpled, and when he finally looked at me, there were tears in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. That one word hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd known it was coming, hearing him confirm it made everything real in the most devastating way. But then he said something that stopped my world from completely falling apart. "But Sarah, you have to understand. It stopped being about the money the first day I met you." I wanted to scream at him, to throw him out, to never see his face again. But something in his voice made me pause. "Tell me everything," I said. "From the beginning, and don't you dare lie to me again." David took a shaky breath and began to talk. "Jennifer approached me 4 months ago. She found me through a service." "Not what you're thinking," he added quickly, seeing my face. "It's a companion service for seniors, people who need escorts to events, someone to have dinner with, that kind of thing. I started doing it after Carol died because I was lonely, and it helped pay the bills." "So you're a professional date?" I said flatly. "I was. Yes. Jennifer told me about you, that you'd been alone for years, that you'd given up on love, that watching you be lonely was breaking her heart. She offered me $40,000 to date you for 6 months. 6 months, I repeated. What was supposed to happen after 6 months? David looked away. I was supposed to let you down gently. Tell you I wasn't ready for a serious relationship because of Carol. Make it seem like it was about me, not you. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only had they planned to deceive me, they'd planned to make me believe I wasn't good enough to keep him. But something changed, David continued, his voice urgent now. That first day at the coffee shop, when you started talking about the book, about Evelyn Hugo and what love really meant. I saw this light in your eyes, this intelligence and warmth and humor that just drew me in. And then you smiled, really smiled, and I felt something I hadn't felt since Carol died. Don't, I warned, don't you dare try to romanticize this. I'm not. I'm telling you the truth. By our third date, I was falling for you. By the end of the first month, I was in love with you. And 2 weeks ago, when I told you I loved you, that wasn't part of any contract, Sarah. That was the most honest thing I'd said to anyone in 3 years. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But how could I trust anything he said after this? If that's true, I said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come clean? Because I was terrified of losing you. I kept thinking I'd find the right way to tell you, the right time. And then I fell deeper and deeper in love with you, and it became harder to imagine confessing that it had all started as a lie. What about the money? I called Jennifer 2 days ago and told her I was giving it back, all of it. I told her I couldn't go through with the plan, that I was going to tell you everything and hope you could forgive me. And what did she say? David's jaw tightened. She threatened to tell you herself if I didn't stick to the agreement. She said it would be kinder to let you have 6 good months than to hurt you with the truth. That sounded like Jennifer, always thinking she knew what was best for everyone else. But then David said something that changed everything. Sarah, I need you to know something else. Something I didn't tell Jennifer, something I've never told anyone. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. I bought this 3 weeks ago, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was going to ask you to marry me. Not because of any contract, not because your sister was paying me, but because in 3 months you became more important to me than the 15 years I had with Carol. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring with a single diamond. This is why I couldn't go through with Jennifer's plan. Because I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life making up for how it started. I stared at that ring, my mind reeling. Was this another manipulation? Another lie designed to keep me from walking away? How can I ever trust you again? I whispered. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know if you can. But I'm willing to spend however long it takes proving to you that what we have now is real. That's when I made a decision that surprised both of us. We're going to see Jennifer, I said, standing up. Right now, together. David looked terrified. Sarah, maybe we should... No, I need to hear this from her. I need to understand why my own sister thought I was so pathetic that she had to buy me a boyfriend. The drive to Jennifer's house was silent. David kept glancing at me like he expected me to jump out of the moving car. Maybe I should have. Jennifer's face when she opened the door and saw us both standing there told me everything I needed to know. The guilt, the panic, the desperate scramble for an explanation. Sarah, what a surprise. I was just... Cut the crap, Jen. I know. We sat in her pristine living room, the one she'd redecorated 3 times in the past 5 years because she got bored, and I waited for her to explain herself. I was trying to help you, she began, tears already forming in her eyes. You were so lonely, so convinced that no one could love you. I just wanted you to remember what it felt like to be happy. By hiring an actor? By giving you a chance to see yourself the way others see you. David wasn't acting when he told you that you were beautiful, Sarah. He wasn't acting when he laughed at your jokes or held your hand or... How would you know? I snapped. You paid him to do all of those things. I paid him to give you a chance, Jennifer shot back, her own anger flaring now. A chance you would never have given yourself. And look what happened. You fell in love, and more importantly, someone fell in love with you. Someone who was being paid $40,000. Someone who's giving that money back, David interjected quietly. Jennifer looked at him in shock. You can't. We had an agreement. I'm breaking the agreement, David said firmly. I should have broken it months ago. This is insane, Jennifer said, standing up and starting to pace. Sarah, you're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you because of pride. I'm throwing it away because it was built on a lie. So what if it was? Jennifer exploded. So what if it started as a lie? Love stories start in all kinds of ways. Some people meet at work, some meet online, some meet because their sister hired someone to show them they were worthy of being loved. The room went silent. Even Jennifer seemed shocked by what she'd just said. Is that really what you think? I asked quietly. That I needed to be shown I was worthy of love? Jennifer's face crumpled. Sarah, you haven't dated anyone in 15 years. You've convinced yourself that you're invisible, that you're not worth loving because of your size. I've watched you shrink into yourself year after year, and it's been breaking my heart. So you decided to fix me? I decided to show you that you were wrong. I looked at David, who had been sitting silently through this exchange, and then back at my sister. The worst part isn't that you hired him, I said. The worst part is that you thought so little of me that you believed I could only find love if it was purchased. Jennifer started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I just wanted you to be happy. That's when I realized something that changed my perspective on everything. Jennifer, I said gently, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She nodded, wiping her eyes. How much of this was about me, and how much was about your own guilt? She looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, how much of this was because you felt guilty for having the life I never got? The husband, the kids, the fairy tale romance? How much of this was about making yourself feel better for being the pretty sister? The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah, that's not... It's okay, I said. I understand. You've spent our whole lives watching me struggle while everything came easily to you. And maybe part of you felt responsible for that, even though it wasn't your fault. Jennifer broke down crying again, but this time it was different. It was the cry of someone who'd finally been seen. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much, and I hated watching you give up on yourself. I know. But Jen, you can't fix other people's lives, even when you love them, even when it hurts to watch them struggle. I turned to David, who had been watching this exchange with something like wonder. And you, I said, I need to know something. Anything. If we try to make this work, and I'm not saying we will, but if we do, can you promise me that there will never be another lie between us? Ever? Yes, he said without hesitation. Even if the truth is ugly? Even if it hurts? Especially then. I looked at the ring box, still sitting on Jennifer's coffee table, where David had placed it during our confrontation. I'm not ready for that, I said, pointing to it. I may never be ready for it. Too much has happened. David nodded. I understand. But, I continued, and both of them looked at me hopefully. I'm willing to start over, completely over. No money, no contracts, no lies, just two people getting to know each other honestly. You mean? David asked. I mean, we're going to date. Real dating. Where you tell me about your real life and your real friends and the real reasons you sometimes look sad when you think I'm not watching. And I'm going to tell you about my insecurities and my fears and all the reasons I convinced myself I wasn't worth loving. David smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him since this whole mess started. I'd like that very much. I turned to Jennifer. And you are going to stay out of it completely. No advice, no interference, no trying to help. If this works, it works because we choose each other, not because you orchestrated it. She nodded eagerly. Whatever you need. What I need is for you to trust me, to live my own life, make my own mistakes, and find my own happiness. Can you do that? I can try. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd woken up that morning. But it was real, and maybe that was enough. That was 18 months ago. David and I did start over, and it was nothing like the fairy tale romance Jennifer had paid for. It was messier, more complicated, more real. We had fights about his tendency to avoid difficult conversations and my habit of assuming the worst about people's motivations. We went to couples therapy to work through the trust issues. There were times when I wondered if we were crazy to try to build something real on such a broken foundation. But we also had moments of genuine connection that were deeper than anything I'd experienced during those first 3 months. Because when someone chooses to love you without a contract, without payment, without any external motivation except their own heart, it means something different. David never did propose again. We talked about marriage, but I told him I needed more time to trust in forever. He understood, and he waited. And 6 months ago, on a Tuesday morning at the same coffee shop where we'd first met, I was the one who brought up the idea of spending our lives together. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure that I love you," I said. "I'm sure that you love me, and I'm sure that whatever comes next, we'll face it honestly. We're planning a small wedding for next spring. Jennifer is my maid of honor, because despite everything, she's still my sister, and her heart was in the right place even if her methods were wrong." Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor, finally told me why she'd stared at David that night at Giuseppe's. Turns out she'd seen him at the grocery store buying flowers for his late wife's grave every week for 2 years. She said she'd never seen anyone grieve so beautifully, and when she saw him with me, looking happy for the first time since Carol's death, it had surprised her. That story told me more about who David really was than all the perfect dates Jennifer had paid for. As for the $40,000, David insisted on donating it to a literacy program at our local library. He said money that had started as a lie should be used to help spread truth. I still struggle with my weight. I still have days when I look in the mirror and wonder what David sees in me. But I've learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to be imperfect with someone who chooses to see your beauty anyway. And sometimes, the most real love stories begin with the most unreal circumstances. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it's complicated, and maybe some of you think I was crazy to give David a second chance. Others might think Jennifer was just trying to help in the only way she knew how. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you loved lied to you with good intentions? Have you ever felt so invisible that you understood why someone might pay for companionship? Have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who broke your trust but genuinely loved you? Leave your stories in the comments below. This community has taught me that none of us are alone in our struggles, and sometimes the most healing thing we can do is share our truth with others who understand. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Heartland Confessions. Every like, every subscription, every comment reminds me that our stories matter, that our experiences, messy and complicated as they are, deserve to be heard. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of love, worthy of honesty, and worthy of writing your own story, even if it doesn't begin the way you expected. This is Sarah, and these are my Heartland Confessions.